In this movie, we're going to look at our Patchies ice cream postcard and learn some tips, tricks, and techniques. The first tip, I guess it could be a technique or a trick, is using our Pages panel. So here's our Pages panel right here. And in this panel, you can see our master page, which comes up by default as a master. And you can see that we have 2 pages within this particular document, our front page and our back page. Well, InDesign has the ability to have within one document pages that are multiple or different sizes or different layout orientations. So right now, if you look at our document, you can see that both pages are landscape orientation. Well, let's say that you wanted to, for example, make the front of your postcard portrait orientation. In order to do that, it's very simple, and I'm going to show you how right now. Just for the sake of our demonstration, I'm going to add a third page. And as you can see, it's landscape orientation. And if I want to make this portrait orientation or change the size of the document, I come over to my tool palette here and I click on my page tool. And you'll see right away that a bounding box appears around my page. And if you look up here in our menu bar, you'll see that there's a width and a height. So if I wanted to change that, I could. But what I really want to do is just change the orientation. So I'll click here for portrait. And then when I look over my pages palette, you'll see that I have landscape, landscape, portrait. So this is now portrait orientation. So InDesign, once again, has the ability to have different sizes of documents or different orientations within a single document. A good example would be if you had a client and you were doing a letterhead, envelope, and business card design. You could incorporate all 3 of those documents within one document under the client's name. And that is the end of our first little tip. Now, onward, I'm going to take this and just drag this and throw it away now. Let's go to the first page of our document. First of all, I want to remind you that when you have any text, try to do it all as one text box if possible. And then as a reminder, go over to your paragraph palette and use either space before or space after to add space between the paragraphs. And I'm working with my invisibles on right here and here. And if you don't know where they are, go up under type and you'll see hidden characters, or I also call them invisibles, so that you can actually see what's going on in your document kind of behind the scenes or like an x-ray level. And don't forget to use space before, space after, not a hard return to put space between paragraphs. That's your first little tip or reminder. The second little reminder is you want to make sure that you have hierarchy established and no more than 2 fonts. So going from there, we're going to look at our images. And right here we have a couple images. We have one in the background and we have one right up here in the foreground. I want to remind you by clicking on this image and dragging it to the side that images are comprised of a container and the image themselves. So just looking at this right here, I want you to notice right away, just by mousing over, I have this kind of circle or bullseye that appears in the middle. This blue line or this bounding box is the container that I have selected. If I click on this bullseye, you'll see the brown line appear. That is the actual image or the contents of the container. So images always have a container and then the image itself is the content. I can also easily switch between the container and the content by coming up here and by selecting these buttons here. Notice it says select content. Now the content is selected. When I go up here, I can select the container and the container is selected. So handy dandy little shortcut up here. Next to it right here, I can also flip the image. And notice when I do that this P here reflects exactly what orientation the image is. I can also rotate it. Okay, a couple little tips there. And then over here in your content bar, you have 5 or 6 little squares, and I want you to be able to use your tool tip to read and see which one is. So this will fill the frame proportionally, which is a good thing. This will fit the content proportionally, and that's also a good thing. This fits the content to the frame. Try to avoid that because you'll end up with images that are non-proportionally scaled. This will fit the frame to the content, and this will center your content. And down here is auto fit. So let's just take a look at these and start to play with these with images, paying attention to what you have selected here, the content or the frame, and also whether you have auto fit selected. So let's do auto fit, and I'll just show you how that works. It basically does what it says it's going to do. If I grab an edge of my container, hold down my shift key to constrain, and I move downward, notice how it automatically fits the content to the size of my container. So this is really a handy option to have selected, but make sure you deselect it when you're finished with it, okay? Now, another option, I'm going to select the middle here so you can see that I have my content selected. I'm going to move this off to the side, okay? It's okay if your content goes beyond, so you can crop a larger image and do some creative cropping. So if it's a little bit larger, that's okay. But then if I want to center it again, I can just click back here and it will center it. So you can play with these options. Just be aware that they are here and that they're very handy. So I'm going to click on the edge so I can just grab this and I'm going to bring it over here. I think it's a little bit smaller than it was. So if I want to increase the entire size of the picture, I can go up here because I have the container selected. Once again, paying attention what you have selected, and I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. And then I'm using my arrows to reposition it. So that looks pretty good to me right there. Now, the second part of our images section that I want to deal with deals with our links. Now, if you open up your links palette and kind of expand it a little bit, I'm going to show you a couple things that I want you to add onto your palette. So go up underneath this contextual menu and go down to panel options. In panel options, make sure you have actual and effective PPI selected because this will give you actually what the pixels per inch is, and if you have scaled it, what the effective PPI is based upon the percentage that you have reduced the image. Remember, you don't want to ever go above 100% or above the actual size of the image. It's always okay to go lower. So click OK. And notice how I have two more columns show up, and these are really handy. So this links palette will give me the name of the image, and you'll see this tooltip popping up here. It gives me the page it's on. Its actual PPI. This is when I open this in Photoshop, and I'll just grab, let's say, this one right here. And if you click down here, Edit Original, it will open it up in Photoshop. And then I can go to Image, Image Size, and prove to you that it is 300%. Okay, let's go back to InDesign. And then this one here says effective. So really, if I'm looking at this Sunday, which is right here, okay, I can click on one and see how it kind of highlights it, and notice the image is selected, not the container. Notice it's about twice the size, the effective PPI of the actual PPI. That's because I have reduced this image. If this is larger than this column, this means you've reduced it. If it's lower, then that means that you've made it larger, which you don't want to do. So how do I check this? How do I check what percentage this actual image is at? Well, I select it just like I did, selecting here, or I can select it up here, or just hit the target in the middle so I have the image selected. And you'll notice that the toolbar changes again. Remember, this toolbar always changes depending upon what you have selected. And notice it's at 42%. So that makes sense. I have reduced this image basically 58%. So 702 PPI is about 58% larger than 300 PPI. This will be always what it says in Photoshop. This, you never want it to be smaller than this number here. And notice I did say that you could go about 200 to 300 PPI to start out with, and this image started out at 180 PPI, but it's okay because she actually decreased it, which increased its effective PPI. So there's a little bit of play, and if you don't understand all that, come and see me separately. It's kind of like math. So if I check each one of these right here, let's check this one. This is the background image, okay, and it's 180. 287, so that means that I've reduced it, and if I look up here, I can see, look, that I can see that it is under 100%. Something that you want to avoid, though, is making sure it's over 100% here, and making sure that something is not proportionally placed. So I'll show you an example of that. If I click on my Sunday again, I'm just going to use this time the target in the middle. Here's my Sunday. I'm going to deselect this lock, which constrains the proportions for scaling. And if I happen to start like making this a little bit larger, maybe making this a little bit smaller, you'll notice that my image is squashed. This is something that is a no-no. You always want to make sure that your image is 100%, which means that these two values will always match. So I'm going to fix this, and I'm going to click here, and then I'm just going to simply click on one of these, which automatically fixes it. Now it's at 52%. And then let's say I want to make this easy on myself. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go fit content to frame. And there we go. Notice it's at 49.91 something, but the numbers are the same, so that doesn't matter. We can make it 43%. Okay? So you're going to have to spend some time playing in this palette here. Remember now that you can stop this video and go back to it anytime. Okay? So that's a little tip for images. Now I'm going to hit the command key and the minus, kind of reduce this, and we'll start tackling the second part of this, which is page 2. I'm going to switch this over to page 2. So I'm on page 2. I'm going to reduce the size of this a little bit. And I have placed the template on a bottom layer. If I go to layers, you can see that the student who I borrowed this from used a bunch of different layers to organize her artwork, and that's perfectly fine. You should get used to using layers. And on the bottom layer, as instructed in the brief, is our template. So if I turn off the eyeball, there is the artwork without the template. And then here's the artwork with the template. You're going to see that there is a key line. So this is our no-fly area between edge of the document and this key line. This is our bleed, and we don't really have a bleed for the back of it. Okay, I'm going to put it back in the window again. But notice that she set up her indicia within this zone, which is perfectly fine. She could even move it around. If you want to move it in a little bit more, that's perfectly fine too, as long as it is within this particular zone. So I've moved it over a little bit. I have my return address, and then let's hide this template again. Here is my special right here, and she has a text wrap on this particular image. So this is the next little tip that I'm going to teach you. If you have an image, depending upon what it is, you should have a text wrap on it if you want the text to flow around it. And this is a nice example because we have selected here wrap around object shape. So if you notice that the text actually goes around the shape, and notice that it's a contour options, you could choose user modified path. You could choose same as clipping. It depends on exactly what you have set up. You could choose detect edges. So here's detect edges. And when I zoom into this image, notice when I grab my direct selection tool, notice these little points. I'll pull one out so you can see it. It literally makes a path. Sometimes it's very crudely done, but you can go in and you can adjust this path. Notice how my text moves. So sometimes you have to refine text next to a path, but it only works in this option here, wrap around object shape. So this is a really nice example of how you can use wrap around object shape, then use your direct selection tool and go in and you can adjust the text wrap around the particular object. Other options we have here are no text wrap. So look what happens when we have no text wrap. Okay, it's running into it. This is around the bounding box. So when I choose that, the text is pushed around the bounding box. But what I really want is yeah, that was my phone. I really want a text wrap around the object shape. So this is where I use this, and then I can refine it using my direct selection tool by clicking on points on this particular line here. So that is our text wrap in a nutshell. You can also use this, and if I start pushing out, see how it's pushing out a little bit more, it's making it a little bit bigger. So I can reduce and increase the size of my text wrap depending upon the object that I have selected and the type of text wrap that I have. Only use this option if you have text within a column structure. This one again is for the bounding box. This is for if you have an object like this nice little sundae that I want my text to flow around. So I'm going to hit my command and minus key, or command 0 to fit in a window, collapse this, and then if I want to preview my work without all these distracting lines, if I hit the W key, I'm just going to click to the side. There I have a nice preview of my project here. Now, one last little thing, sometimes these images will appear a little bit pixelated, and that's okay because InDesign automatically creates a low resolution preview in order to keep the file size lower. If you want to see a preview that is full strength print level, you want to go up to View and choose Overprint Preview. See how it kind of cleaned up there? So Overprint Preview, and you'll get to see a nice clean version of your file. Do not work in Overprint Preview because it creates larger files, but it's just nice to kind of check and see, okay, what would that look like if I actually printed it? So I deselected that, and then I hit the W key again to take me out of preview mode, and I'm back in working mode, and I believe that is it. I think I've covered it all. So if you have any questions, you can refer back to the movie and have fun with this one. Good luck.